suggestions for converting a blog post into a video. So basically, you can think of a blog post actually as the script for a video. The question is just how do you then turn the script into something that is a video? In general, I think it would make sense to say that it usually seems the most natural if the person is just speaking naturally. So therefore, if you have a teleprompter, you can maybe guess that the person is reading from a teleprompter because their eyes are moving like this. So maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just want to talk freely. So therefore, it doesn't really make sense to script the videos because then you don't have this easy switch, this easy either read something or talk freely switch. Because if you then remember only parts and then if you have the whole thing written, then you maybe don't want to rely on your more crappier free speech. So therefore, there's an argument to be made that you should either completely read something or completely speak freely. And if you speak freely, you can of course have notes, but the notes should not be written out in full sentences. So these should only be kind of bullet points. But a bullet point list is usually not a blog post. So therefore, if you already have a blog post and you now want to turn it into video, I would argue there are two different strategies. The first one is to now make a similar video based on the blog post. So you turn the blog post basically into notes, and then you have a video that covers the same topic, but nevertheless hovers a little bit more around the topic, maybe leaves out certain things. But what you are essentially creating is two different kinds of content. You are creating not the same, just in video form, but you're creating something different. This is something I needed to learn, at least for myself, when I read blog posts and I also tried to then speak freely and add additional information. The problem is just, because it is then not, again, reiterable, so this means you cannot just do another read, because previously you spoke freely, and whenever you speak freely, it's unique. So therefore you cannot just redo the same thing again and again, because then you have an element of variation in between. Originally, what I wanted to do is to just write a blog post and to then just somehow turn it into an identical video, because then I could say this is the same, just in video form. So you maybe do not want to add additional notes or speak freely about the same topic, because if you speak freely about the same topic, of course you will say similar things, but maybe it's just not identical, and that's the main point. Also, if you're tracking your videos, your content, then it's just not the same file. It's just not the same tracking unique ID. Therefore, I think it makes sense in general to have a distinction between speaking freely, which then usually is video or audio, and something that is written that also can be read. So the distinction I now made is that on all of my main channels, basically, at least on the channels where I speak freely, whether these are the main channels or not is up to debate. But what I do is I do have two types of content, either short, 60 seconds, or longer. And these are both spoken freely. These are basically improvised on the spot or with additional notes, but I don't write out these notes as something, because then it would be a blog post. The original idea between this duality between blog posts and videos, scripted videos, would be, or in my mind was, that I would write basically the script for my video, maybe add a few additional elements, and then I already have a scripted video, which I only would turn into a video. The main reason I am not doing this right now is because in terms of opportunity cost, which is the concept that for every unit of time you do something, you could also do something else. And you have the responsibility basically to do the best thing. I mean, you can also choose something else, but if I can record a video on a topic where I speak freely and therefore or thereby also improve my ability to speak freely again and again and again, then maybe writing something is just less effective, because you can just input less words per minute compared to this here. Even though it is a format that might be more flawed, but people might also be more willing to accept that my speech is maybe more flawed if I speak compared to me writing something and then turning it into something that is written. If you see another person that obviously doesn't read and only maybe uses notes, it's kind of clear that this is kind of a conversational style. Whereas if you have something written, then it's clear that there shouldn't be any mistakes in it. In the beginning, I therefore had these scripted videos my blog posts basically, and I just screen recorded them on my phone, and while I was turning them into audio basically. And the main reason I wanted to do this, because I would then have a high quality podcast. So I had these scripted videos, and I then began to record YouTube, and I realized it doesn't make any sense to script all the different things because I just am running out of time basically. I cannot script as many videos as I would want to record videos. So therefore the free option, Freely Speaking, is the better option for recording videos actually. Which leaves the question, what do you do with these blog posts? You can turn them into videos, and now that's what we discuss. Just turning these written scripts or a blog post into videos. And of course they can be both simultaneously. The first one is that you just add again some kind of visual element, and this could be you. The second one is that you don't add a visual element that is you. So basically it's a video without any presenter. Of course, the presenter could also be somebody different to you. So the first one is with presenter, the second one is without presenter. If you have a video without presenter, you have two options of having text or having the information that is displayed in the text. Either you just have the text displayed on the video in some way or another. This could be just the captions. This also could be the text written on maybe footage of something else. The second option is to add audio to this video. Of course, you can also add additional music and other audio to a video that also has captions on the screen. But what I'm meaning is the information that is in the blog post is then turned into audio, which is usually voice. Which is kind of the standard format for these presentation style videos you find on YouTube, Wendover, Polymeter, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, you have the talking format, which then again has all the different effects and different variables you can tune in and out. Like you reading from a teleprompter, like you reading maybe from an additional screen, and the distinction is clear. I think it makes sense, at least as of me strategizing this, is that it is distinctive and it is also recognizable that you are reading from somewhere else, even though the screen currently is empty. It's completely a black screen, as you can see. I'm just using this as kind of a reference point compared to you potentially trying to not make it visible that you are reading and making it appear as if you are not reading and as if you were talking freely, whereas in reality you actually aren't. So there is kind of this element of deception if the line in between those two is kind of blurred, I would say. Often I am disappointed if I see something on YouTube and then I'm realizing they are reading from the screen and recording with the phone camera or reading from a teleprompter. Of course, you can now also blend these two formats. You can record maybe the baseline footage, which is you talking also with audio, so preferably with already high quality audio, which you also could use as an audio overlay. So therefore you have in your editing, you have the audio overlay on the bottom, and in addition to this audio overlay, you also already have a video overlay, which is you talking. So this is what I'm currently recording. What I could add on top of this is additional footage. So I could insert screenshots, I could insert other pictures, I could insert also moving images like stock footage or footage of me doing things. So as the first base layer in a video that is kind of an edited video, I would say, you have the audio layer, which then is maybe simultaneously synchronized to the video layer in the form that it is basically a talking head format. What you now can do additionally, so this is the combination of those two formats, I would say, is you can lay images and also other visuals on top of both of these elements, which allows you to not have images all the time, because a general problem is if you don't have this video layer and you just have the audio, or you don't even have the audio speech layer, but write everything on screen, then writing everything on screen will probably take maybe similar in terms of time compared to writing the blog post. So one main benefit of having a talking head layer with audio or just speech layer is that you don't need that much time to arrange all the elements in the video editor. Main benefits now is that you have a layer, a base layer, which you can revert back to if there are no images in between. So if there are no images, you just continue back to this layer. But if you have something additionally that is more interesting than you, then you can add additional visual elements such as video footage or pictures. Now, depending on what you leave out the audio, then you need to probably replace it somehow with captions. If there is text that needs to be added to the video, or information in the form of text that needs to be added to the video. If you leave out this layer, then you basically have a Polymatter video or a Wendover Productions video where there is just a narrator, and then there are visual elements. So basically these visual elements then would have to be continuous. If you don't have the visual elements, then you have a talking head format video, and of course there are different variations of this, using either a teleprompter, using a fairly distinct reading device. And this is actually probably the route I am going down, because then it is also for me in my head distinct from the format of Talking Head 3D. But nevertheless, I am not trying. So here is the problem I had with turning my blog posts into videos. The problem I had is that the screen recordings of me reading, and of course there are also visual elements in the blog post, but the problem is if I enlarge this element, for example, if I take a look at this picture, I maybe also need to describe this picture, or I need to say a few additional things, which again deviates from the path of this is just written. Therefore it is then more on the improvised front again, but of course the main thing is still written, so therefore the distinction is not as clear. What you actually want, ideally, is you want the audio layer and then these images layered in a video editor on top of the whole thing and not done manually. Now, of course, you can also do this live. A very good example is Meet Kevin. He has figured out a very efficient process of basically just recording his screen and having different cameras he can then switch to, and then he can also pull up something on the screen and so on and so forth. I haven't figured out something like this. The main problem of having a very intense video where you have a talking head layer, or you leave out the talking head layer and just have all of these different visual elements, is that you need to currently store all of these. You need to organize the files, which takes a lot of time, and also because it is so many files, the overall file that is then the video, the whole thing, becomes very large, and therefore you also need additional processing power, maybe an external graphics card for rendering the video, which then takes minutes and minutes, maybe hours, depending on how much performance your PC actually has, or your phone or your tablet, depending on where you render and edit this video. So the screen reading format I had previously, I think, is not as engaging. I got almost no views compared to me talking about the same topic, maybe with the talking format, at least in the short form, which got usually a little bit more engagement. Now what I did is I mixed the long free format with these screen recordings on YouTube, which I think was not a very good strategy because it just didn't optimize for targeting the right audience, because these were two different formats. So what I'm thinking now is, for me at least, it would be the easiest solution to also record in 1:1 time, to just have a distinct reading. So the camera is here and I'm reading from here, therefore it is clear that I'm reading, and to then turn, because I still want to turn these written things somehow into video, because that's something I already have spent a lot of time making some of these blog posts, and I do want to have a video equivalent. So what I'm thinking is that I will do the same talking head format, but I will just read from the screen, and it probably will look like this. Buying refurbished camera tech or gear. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the philosophy of buying stuff in general. And I think this is a fairly useful format. I could potentially additionally draw something on here, but it again doesn't make sense. One additional thing I maybe want to give to you as a maybe mental distinction that makes just recording things like these easier is the following. If you have a very short idea, so in general, if you have an idea, you can categorize them by, is it an idea that I need more than 60 seconds to talk about this or less? If yes, then make a YouTube video where you just talk freely about this stuff, and over time you will probably improve. If you don't want to show your face, then you need to figure out an alternative solution, maybe again, as we discussed, with other visual elements, just cancel out the talking head format. If the narrator also doesn't want to be you, then you also need to figure out either how to put in captions or how to have another narrator you can maybe get on Fiverr, for example. Now, if it is shorter than 60 seconds, you can turn it into a short. The now nice thing is, at least for me, because I have decided to record both videos in the same 16:9:16 actually format, so it's portrait format, that the distinction between those two is only the length. It's not a different format entirely. So therefore, whenever I'm having a short idea, but it turns out to be something that needs more explanation, I can just continue the video and I have a long idea. So the distinction for me, the distinction criteria between these two different formats that I categorized basically all of the different formats that are out there into these two is just how long it needs to be. And now, additionally, what you also can basically convert into these two formats is visual formats. So I think of media in 3 different categories. It's either just visual, it's either just audio, or it's both combined, which is called video. Now, if you have this distinction of having something that is either 60 seconds or something that is longer than 60 seconds, so 60 seconds but bigger, then what also becomes clear is that if you take the normal speaking speed and then you convert it just into text, and this is something you can do in the future, maybe also even without you writing, and you can also already do this with Google Docs, for example, on the internet, where you can just dictate. Of course, there are some downsides to dictation, but nevertheless, you can somehow, and also YouTube already transcribes your videos if you upload them, you can turn it into text. Now, in terms of text, I now have 2 formats. The first one is the Twitter format. So it is limited in terms of the characters, which also correlates to the time limit when speaking these words out. So if I have an idea and I want this idea to be a tweet, a text, basically a short text, then I just, as of currently, tweet it natively on Twitter with an additional buffering platform that is called Buffer in order to avoid the media feed, the social media feed on Twitter. Because it is also a platform that wants to engage you, I think it makes sense to avoid these. The same is true for YouTube, where I just block all the feeds with Chrome extensions. Now, there are also extensions for other browsers. And therefore, I searched for a platform that would be equivalent to Twitter and host my blog posts, basically. I previously self-hosted my blog posts, but I figured it would be easier if I just outsourced this thing to a company that already does this, basically for a living, and I wouldn't have to manage the backend of all of these different blogs, because this was very time-consuming. So what I now have is, if I want to make an idea, the first route to go is to turn it into a video. Why? Because it's the most engaging, it takes the least amount of time, I don't have to log in into any platforms, I can record offline and store as many, provided I have enough storage on my phone, of these shorts or longs on my phone as I want. I don't even need a computer, I just need maybe something like a drawing board like this. If I want to have the same thing, but the text or visual equivalent, and text is not the right word because you can obviously also add embedded images, embedded videos, and so on and so forth to text. So I would say it's a visual format. It is similar to a newspaper, just in digital, and therefore you have also moving images. Think of Harry Potter and this newspaper on the wall where there were moving images. That's the reality now. You could just have a screen on the wall and moving images. And we also have screens on the wall everywhere, in the subway and so on and so forth. So moving newspapers are now a reality, that's what I'm trying to say. And in digital, I therefore now have 2 different platforms I can very easily choose. It's either Twitter or Medium. If it's short, it's Twitter. If it turns into something longer, then I turn it into a blog post on Medium. There would also be an in-between space where it could be a Facebook post, because Facebook allows you to have no character limit like Twitter, but I think it just makes sense to base also the length of these tweets basically on the character length of Twitter currently, but also on the 60 seconds. Just use this very easy rule, or just using this very easy rule of, does it take more than a minute to explain this? And often I think that I could even shorten these videos down to maybe 15 seconds. I could say the same thing, just better in 15 seconds, in 10 seconds maybe. Because often I tend to over-explain things, just as I added also this now here. First question also. So the first question would be, do I want this to be a video? Also, if I just record the idea, I could already record the idea directly on Twitter, but there are also, maybe due to the incentives on Twitter, this doesn't make the most sense. So maybe here a workflow, and that's also kind of the current workflow I use. If I have an idea, I record it either as a voice note on my phone or as a voice note on my watch, which synchronizes to my phone. Then I input it into my current database of ideas, which is in my Task Manager. Why in Task Manager and not in Notion, which I use to basically manage all the different content ideas and also the videos that are already live, also the blog posts. And I use Notion for this. And the reason I don't use Notion for the collection of ideas, even though it would make sense, is because Notion is laggy. And at least in the ideation process, I think it makes sense to just have something that is quick. I then can turn these text ideas basically. I can just copy paste them to Twitter, usually, if they are already written out properly. Or I could elaborate on that on text if I have a day where I don't want to record video, or if I just think it makes more sense to have this topic here. Or if I say I don't want to have my face connected to this topic, and therefore only the channel itself is connected to this topic, so I still said this, but I can also delete it and edit it. So I can turn this into a blog post. And ideally I turn everything here into a video, which I then don't have to have one-to-one in terms of the script, but the shorter video is, the more sense I think it makes to just have more scripted videos basically. So the notes are more identical to the things you're actually saying, because there is just not much room or time for varying these things, and you need to be short. And if I either record something and it tends then to be longer, I just record longer and then it is a long video I done publish to YouTube, and also obviously in the future to other platforms like Facebook Watch, and also and these platforms basically, and TikTok might also expand to more than 10 minutes and so on and so forth. In total, turning blog posts into video, I think, is interconnected with so many other issues, with the issue of how do you best spend your time? Do you best spend your time blogging? If I write a blog post, for example, and I would have written this out as a blog post, it would have been probably shorter in total in terms of the words I said, but now it took me maybe 30, 40 minutes. The other thing would have taken me probably 3 hours, I would argue. So therefore, I can't just record maybe 5 times, maybe 10 times the amount of content if I record directly on video. And I would argue that maybe it is also just a little bit more clear, not in terms of precise and accurate, but probably if I add visual information, if I have my hands, if I can change the tone of my voice, compared to just having the same monotone text basically that everybody can interpret, and therefore there is more room for interpretation in text compared to video or compared to audio, because the inflections of the voice and so on are just additional information, similar to if I'm showing you something in the image, then this is also just additional information that makes it probably easier to understand something, and therefore it requires maybe less focus to understand a video compared to reading text. I also still want to have this as a back option, this option of turning the video ideas I have as a blog post, scripted ideas basically, into videos that are really this format I explained basically, with maybe a base layer of talking head video, but then the distinction for me again is not as clear, so maybe I just would turn it into a narrated version with visual layers, because I really also want to get into producing videos like Wendover Productions and Polymeter, even though it seemingly does not make the most sense, but just being able, at least, or knowing that I'm able to also produce these kind of videos that are just very good, is something that I want to have in the back of my mind, and therefore I created this system of writing these blog posts, maybe already now, and turning them currently low effort into videos. But maybe in the future I either might outsource this, potentially, maybe not, or I will just put in time and actually translate, basically convert a blog post into an actual proper video that is not just me reading.